Welcome back to the programme. Well, this week the witness list is out for those presenting in front of the PUB beginning tomorrow, the 25th of June, with someone representing Newfoundland Power as a consultant, talk about executive compensation and all the way down the line. Join us on line number 2 to talk about the workings at the Public Utilities Board is Doc O'Keefe. Good morning, Doc. You're on the air.
Morning, Paddy. How are you?
Couldn't be better. How about you?
Pretty good, I must say. A little turn in the weather, but it'll turn back.
Before we get into the rate hike applications that are in front of us, any further thoughts on the proposed change to how they price fuels? Because, again, and I'm a little bit surprised we haven't heard from people in rural parts of the province. For example, on gasoline, per litre would see an additional 0.7 cents for us here in St. John's, but if you live on Fogo or St. Brendan's, it's 5 cents. So that's a whopping big change. Or change back.
And I'm surprised too, really. There hasn't been a lot of reaction yet in that regard. And in regard to some of the other recommendations of the review document, which was done by Calibrate, not done at the request of the PUB, of course, following a request from the provincial government. So, the Calibrate, let's call it the report is in, and it makes a series of recommendations, one of which you just referred to. And, it is kind of surprising. Sometimes maybe the reaction doesn't come until it's too late and the deed is done. And so now's the time for people to let their feelings be known on the issue and whether or not they want these particular revisions to the formula. I'm meeting on Thursday with the regulatory committee of the PUB, and they did reach out to me about 10 days ago, and I indicated to them at the time that, I'd love to sit down with them or their representative, and so we've set up a time for Thursday afternoon, and really what they're looking for is my input into the series of recommendations. I mean, some of these recommendations are routine and they're really no big deal, but there are a few of them there that can have very serious impacts, and they need to be looked at. And that will be the purpose of the meeting on Thursday, and we'll see where it goes from there. But that one in particular, and I think I made the point before when I talked to you, the ability to determine the relationship of the price of fuel in a rural community or any community, it could be St. John's, but let's talk about a rural community, the ability to make adjustments is already within the power of the PUB. So why they're going down this other road additionally, I don't know, because they can make changes by order of the PUB under the zone differential, where the province is divided into zones based upon geography, or the total allowable markup. So, the ability to adjust is there. Additionally, this other impact that would take place up to 6 or 7 or more cents on rural communities, which is a levy because they are rural. I mean, that's the injustice right here now, because this is going to be a double whammy.
Now, of course, it stands to reason that the cost of transport fuels far afield does indeed have a price implication, but that's a whopping big difference. It's strange. A decade ago, it was not uncommon to see a big difference in price between, say, St. John's, even as close as Clarendon. And then, of course, things leveled off much more, which I was really unsure as to how and why that was happening. But now this proposal is going to put us right back to that real distinct fluctuation in price.
Yeah, and, my point when I meet on Thursday is going to be that if you go back to the beginning of the whole issue of regulation and by the Consumer Group for Fair Gas Prices, you just have to look at the title of that group, the Consumer Group for Fair Gasoline Prices. And that's because up to that time, the control of the prices was entirely in the hands of the industry. And so consumers like you and I and every other consumer really had no input into it. It could be a Monday or a Tuesday or a Sunday, and all of a sudden the prices went up. All of that changed when we brought in regulation, and the whole issue of regulation was based on price fairness to everybody. and that includes the retailer, the wholesaler, and the industry. So if we set that as our goal, then any formula that is arrived at should be aimed at achieving still that particular goal, unless that has changed.
Unless that has changed is a good question. And you said there's some really serious ramifications that you want to talk about with the committee. Can you give me an example? Or have you already articulated it?
Well, for example, I think this extraordinary price mechanism that we went through in the past year, where we had prices set on a Thursday and then early Friday morning prices changed. And some consumers were left out in the cold, because all of a sudden, unbeknownst to them, they filled up on a Thursday because the price was set on Thursday, and then early Friday morning, the price changed again.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were really hurt economically. So I agree that the price has to reflect a whole lot of global conditions. I mean, we can't argue against that. There may very well be at different times aberrations in the change of world conditions leading to a change of prices either up or down. But the issue is developing an appropriate formula to make these extraordinary adjustments, because this past year they kept coming at consumers almost like on a regular basis. It was like, hey, we don't have a formula anymore. All we have are these abrupt changes following the setting of the price under the formula. And people became visibly upset. So if you come back to the purpose of regulation, one of the things that had a serious impact on people this year was that extraordinary formula and how it was achieved. So there's got to be a way for the PUB to, I think anyhow, to kind of level that process so that it doesn't impact immediately and severely on consumers, or vice versa, I guess, on the industry, because prices could go the other way too.
100% they could.
You know, that's an example of I think something they really have to have a good look at, as well as this whole rural, call it a rural additional tax if you want. And that has to be looked at. There are things in the 19 or so recommendations that really are routine, and you know, this idea, should we use for our benchmark price, should we use Platts or Argus? And their argument is, well, we've used Platts now for X number of years, so let's change and go and get our data from Argus to fall in line with the other Atlantic provinces. Well, okay, I mean, you want to do that? There's really no reason to do it. There's really no reason not to do it. Just because they do it in Nova Scotia doesn't mean we have to use the same firm here. But if you want to, and there's a good reason behind it, then do it.
I can't imagine
it's not going to have an impact on the public to any great deal.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's going to be a huge difference between Platts or Argus. Would there be?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I doubt it.
And I mean, they say, Calibrate says in their recommendation, we'll do this to be consistent with the other Atlantic provinces. They don't say you got to do this because the data supplied by Argus is much better than that supplied by Platts. What they're saying is, let's make this change so that we fall in line with the other Atlantic provinces. Yeah, well, you know, if there's a benefit, fine. If there's any kind of big disadvantage, no.
But that's an interesting point and argument, because maybe, just maybe, that's being considered because people were wondering how and why it's so different, whether it be the fluctuation in price or the interruption formula being utilised here. Maybe it has something to do with the benchmark numbers I get from Platts or Argus. So when people were saying, well, how come it's so different across Atlantic Canada? And I guess the PUB hears it and says, okay, this is what you want, here you go. We're going to be the same. Now, if that has negative connotation, of course, obviously a mistake on behalf of the consumers. But final thoughts, Dennis, before I sneak another call in here.
One other thought, Paddy, and I just asked you this question because I don't know the answer, and you mentioned it this morning. The wind energy project and the appeals that have gone in to Minister Davis.
Yeah.
And, the rumours out there, and I think I heard you speak to it this morning.
I probably shouldn't have spoken to them.
Whether or not they've all been turned down.
Well, a couple of things, and for the purpose of clarity, is the actual deadline for that final announcement is not yet, but of course the rumbles is that the province has been quite clear. Look, it doesn't take anybody who's got some intimate industry knowledge to know that the province seems quite bullish on it. That's how they talk about it, and so appeals, I mean, even just look at the federal government. They were unwilling to trigger a federal environmental assessment, of course, which would have came with intervener status and some money to hire experts if you're opposed to the project. So reading the current water on the beans is quite clearly that it looks like if the money can be raised and the definition hits their targets insofar as what constitutes green, that it looks like the projects are going to happen. So I suppose I should be hesitant to be involved in the rumour mill, but the rumour mill is pretty loud.
Well, I won't keep you only another 30 seconds. My feeling on it is Minister Bernard Davis needs to come clean on what's happening to the appeals, whether or not they're being duly processed, and what the result of each appeal is, rather than leaving all of us here behind some wall of mystery.
Well, they have to offer a formal response to the appeal so people will know what kind of consideration was offered to their appeal, however many there are in place. And the deadline for the minister to respond is not quite yet. So that's the fair, accurate information. I'm generally not in the business of entertaining rumour mill kind of stuff, but anyway, there's no reason to think at this moment, given what we know, is that unless there's an appeal that has uncovered some ground that has not been considered at this moment in time, involved in the environmental assessment, maybe, just maybe, that they'll be forced to go back to the drawing board, but I guess we'll all find out at the same time. I appreciate this, Doc. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Freddie. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.